It is the Royal Blue podcast brought to you by the Liverpool Echo. I'm Ian Croll, and we are live across YouTube and Facebook. Please remember to like, follow and subscribe to our Echo Everton FC Facebook page and our Everton FC Royal Blue YouTube channel. Please also remember to send in your questions. As mentioned, we are live and we can answer them as soon as they come in. Today's show, I'm joined by the Echo's Everton FC reporter, Chris Beesley. Chris, how are things? You've been off and away to Copenhagen. How's that been?
A winter break, yeah. A bit of word of warning if you've not been, it can be quite expensive, and it's talking about Everton and issues with finances. I think I had a few issues finances after that one, but it was a nice little break and two countries in 2 days as well, because it ticked off Malmo as well, where the Eurovision is. I was told this year, so yeah, nice little break and back to it now.
Was it a kids' holiday, family holiday, or was it just you and the missus?
Yeah, just the two of us. Yeah. First time since before lockdown, and just the two of us go away. So yeah, nice. Like I said, Everton on a winter break, so an opportune moment for me. I think even Joe Thomas was surreptitiously planning it with Mrs. Beesley behind me back, so slide into the old DM. So be careful with that one. But yeah, very nice. Thank you.
What was the weather like? Was it cold?
Same as here. Yeah. A bit combination of cold and bit of rain, but yeah. As we expected this time of year, it was very similar. So ourselves at home with Tommy Gravison, of course, but yeah.
But you didn't see him, did you?
Nah, I didn't see Tommy. No. I could have done with some of his money, and he's supposed to have made a few bob since he retired. And he's
reports suggesting he's based in Las Vegas.
Yeah. So
okay. Well, enough about your travels and Copenhagen adventures. We are returning now back to the cauldron that is Everton Football Club. What are your thoughts really over the next couple of weeks? Are you excited? Any fearful? Anxiety? What's going on through your head?
I think a few issues have to come to a head, don't they? First and foremost with the ownership. The deal was announced in September. Then at the time, it said that Mr. Managerial FC has agreed to sell his entire 94.1% stake to 777. We have to make sure we get all those sevens in. 777, yeah. By the end, that was expected to go through by the end of the calendar year. Last year hasn't gone through. We get towards the end of January now. I understand that 777 have put in sort of not insignificant amounts of money already into the club, so that can't continue forever. It's got to go one way or the other. So we've got to see that one coming to fruition or not, as the case may be. I mean, from my understanding, that they've submitted everything they've been asked of, and there hasn't been any further questions on that score. So it's in the hands of the Premier League, and obviously continuing on with the Premier League, Everton's appeal for the initial 10-point sanction. That we could be seeing that one in the next few weeks, because obviously that one has to be sorted out before they start looking at the second charge on the pitch. In terms of transfers, we always expected that it would be a quiet January window for Everton, so I'm not expecting any big deals, certainly on an incoming point of view, but it'd be interesting to see just if any business is done at all between now and the end of the window.
Oh yeah, amazing. Okay, so as a reminder, we are live, and please remember to submit your questions into the chat, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on Facebook. We've already had in a couple already, so I will get to them as soon as possible. But Chris, and just for everyone who's listening, just today's agenda in pretty much bullet points. We're going to talk about Everton's potential transfer ban as a punishment, which our colleague and the Echo's Everton FC home and away Everton reporter Joe Thomas reported on earlier in the week. We're also going to talk about the appeal process, any transfer news, and of course we've got a massive game against Luton at Goodison Park in the FA Cup fourth round on Saturday. So plenty of football talk, but also plenty of off the pitch talk as well. But yeah, Chris, we'll start with the this potential punishment that's come to light. It's the alternative punishment to a transfer, the points deduction, I suppose, a transfer ban. As mentioned, Joe has talked about this in a couple of his pieces earlier in the week. Transfer ban, not great.
No, I mean, in many ways, depending on how you look at this particular season, with the 10-point deduction, and a transfer ban could actually potentially be more harmful. Certainly, as we know, if a 10-point deduction had come in last season or the year before, it would have been game over. It would have been a death sentence for Everton. That would have seen them relegated. Might not be the case this year. Of course, we've got the appeal and the second charge, all that comes with that or doesn't come. But in terms of a transfer ban, given that there are, as Joe has said in his piece, so many players potentially coming out of contract for Everton in the summer, and it's a chance to do some significant rebuilding for Kalvin Phillips, the director of football, in conjunction with Sean Dyche. Could be a really big summer off the pitch for Everton. I mean, we kind of see this every year, but it really could be this year in terms of you get into the end of a sort of one era in terms of contracts and chance to rebuild. So if Everton were hit by a transfer ban, could seriously hamper their ambitions on that score, because it is scope to be a summer of really significant change for Everton. It's interesting, I think, when you look at the 10-point deduction, and I keep saying as well, it's the biggest sporting sanction in the 135-year history of English top flight football, never mind just the Premier League. One of the alternatives then was which has been discussed was a transfer ban rather than the points. So it'd be interesting to see if it actually switched that way, if Everton got the points back, but then were hit by the transfer ban, in terms of what is actually worse, because when the 10 points initially came in at the end of November, a lot of people were saying, well, they should still be all right anyway. Everton were mid-table side. I think would they still be about 12th now if it wasn't for the points deduction. That this was, if you're ever going to get hit with the 10 points, this would be the year to do it. And that Premier League looks weak at the bottom, certainly compared to what it was last season and maybe next season. So this was the year to sort of get that points deduction, and you'd still be okay. But could be more long-term ramifications if they were to get this transfer ban in terms of the chances of sort of rebuilding the squad this summer.
Yeah, and obviously the articles earlier in the week from Joe talked about Everton's priorities, and obviously the main priority is to stay up this season. But should we do that, then the next step would be to set the club up for next season. Obviously I'm sure that's what every other Premier League club are doing. So Everton stay up this season, regardless of whether the points deduction stays or not. The summer obviously represents a massive opportunity to push on, and obviously Kalvin Phillips and Sean Dyche will, I'm sure, have are going to have a lot to say about that. So it's very hard to say what would be worse at this moment in time, the points deduction, because we don't know how the season's going to pan out, or a transfer ban. We'll come on to the squad in a second, but how much of a blow would it be, and what would you actually prefer?
Yeah, it's hard to say, isn't it? Because we don't know what the ramifications with the appeal and then the second lot, because I mean, it's been pointed out already. Sheffield Wednesday had something similar in the Championship. They were hit with a 12-point deduction. That went to appeal. Theirs got half to 6 points. So realistically, using that as a test case, you could say that Everton might go from 10 points to 5 points. But then what happens with the second lot? I mean, I've just pointed out already that 3/4 of this time period for the second charge actually is covered in the first charge. So there's all kinds of stuff like that. But also with the process of the whole thing, Everton aren't happy. They've got some high-profile people on board now, not just the Super Silk who's been discussed. This nice top lawyer they've got on, probably it slips off the tongue a bit, read easier than his full name. But yeah, obviously high-profile people like the Metro Mayor of the city, Steve Rotherham, despite the fact that he's obviously, and he makes no bones about it, he's a Liverpool fan, but he said that something doesn't smell right when he saw this with the 10-point deduction. And Andy Burnham heard them both speak ahead of the Aston Villa game on that Sunday morning, spoke passionately about this, and that was obviously before the second charge came in. That also some other high-profile people, if you include the former governor of the Bank of England, sort of questioning this whole process. Everton seems to be caught in a crossfire between the Premier League trying to sort of flex its muscles and show that it can deal with these things in-house, and the transparency that goes with that, or doesn't, as the case may be. And obviously we've seen Richard Masters speaking on the subject publicly as well. since then. It's just the whole thing is just a mess. So it's just hard to say. I can't give you an easy answer, yes or no, which one's better or worse, because you just don't know what's going to happen in terms of the points deduction. I mean, Keith Winers, another former chief executive at Everton, he spoke about it and said, the appeal went well. Everton get the whole 10 points back. And so we just don't know how it's going to come down. Obviously, we know it's going to be a different independent panel. It won't be the same three individuals who were on the original independent panel. It is an independent panel, but it's commissioned by the Premier League, and there's only so many people can be on the panel. They can't let you and I go on the panel, or even Joe Thomas. So there's only a certain amount of people.
I have put my name down for it.
Yeah. For some of the other teams, maybe. We'll look at Nottingham Forest case. Which is interesting to get. There was a guy on the original panel was formerly involved with West Ham United, but there's no sort of clear pathway in terms of all that, and it's not just for Everton; it's for the whole Premier League. All of those teams in the bottom half of the table who sort of looking over their shoulders, a fear of relegation. It's just not good enough. Whether you're an Evertonian or whether you're a fan of another team or just a general observer of football, that they supposed it is, the best domestic division in world football, the strongest domestic division. They supposedly the blue chip product when it comes to club football, and we might get to a situation where getting towards the end of the season, you still don't know what anybody needs to do to stay up. It's not good enough, and it needs sorting. But yeah, you can't give you an easy answer. What is this one worse than the other? But like we say, if Everton were to survive, it could seriously hamper their progress going forward. And we know Sean Dyche, I've spoken about it a lot myself. I think he's the best managerial fit for Everton since David Moyes was appointed. He's done incredibly well, especially when you consider all this noise, as he calls it, which is going on in the background. But even with his managerial skill set, he's going to be struggling if he can't actually bring any new faces in the summer, and it really could hamper Everton's progress.
We've had a statement.
Yeah.
From Blue Nose on YouTube, who says, "We've had our arms tied behind our backs for the last 4 seasons. A transfer ban won't mean a thing to us."
I suppose that's one way of looking at it, that Everton have, they've not been suffering from a transfer ban, but they've seriously been hampered in terms of their spending power. And it's something that Sean Dyche alluded to himself when he was asked on the subject for the first time since the second charge came in. And he said that it's very different, isn't it, to the Nottingham Forest situation where they've got promoted for the first time in over 20 years back to the Premier League, and they've basically broken the bank, and they've spent top dollar on all these new players. That as Sean Dyche said, there's been no on-field advantage here. It's an on-field sanction, a sporting sanction. But yeah, Everton, net spend has gone right down. We all know about the years of excess in Farhad Moshiri's early time at the club. Something he's alluded to himself, obviously, in the summer of 2022 when he said that we've not always spent large amounts of money wisely. And that's an understatement, isn't it? But it's because of those years of excess, Everton are sort of feeling the pinch is an understatement now in terms of the sanctions. And as was it Blue Nose, our contributor, as Blue Nose says that they have been spending next to nothing in terms of, see, Ashley Young was the first signing of the Dyche era, of course, a player who Dyche knows well, having played with him himself during the latter end of his career at Watford. But when you're picking up 38-year-olds in a free transfer, Young brings a plethora of experience at this level, but it just shows you just the sort of constraints that Everton have been working in, even when they have spent big money, the likes of Beto, stuff like that. I think they've been highly structured deals, and that certainly aren't large amounts being handed over straight away. I imagine very similar with Yusuf Chamiti as well. So yeah, Everton's spend has gone. Net spend has gone right down. It's one of the lowest in the Premier League for the last couple of years, and that's why it's wrong when people have kind of been saying, "Oh well, Everton were warned about this, and then they went and signed X, Y, and Z and stuff like that." I mean, we've got a piece coming up later on, probably we'll look at that, and Everton have cut their cloth accordingly, and I think that's one of the reasons Blues are sort of feeling so sort of victimised with this. That the Everton have really sort of cut back after that early spending on the Moshiri, yet the chickens are coming home to roost now.
So you sorry, you kind of touched upon the sporting advantage aspect of this whole thing, and it was going to be my next point. And we've also had a question or a statement, whatever way you want to describe it from Gary Toolster on Facebook, who said, what is guaranteed is that the Premier League will do anything to penalise the club. It has to remember that there was no sporting advantage. This whole saga should not have been implemented. Numerous clubs have built stadiums, and the profits and sustainability did not have to be taken into account for the infrastructure and development. So, you know, I think this is obviously we've shouted to the roofs about this sporting advantage.
Yeah.
Is it literally stated that Everton haven't benefited from any sporting advantage from all this. So it's just a crazy, strange one, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
But you can understand the frustration of Everton fans, and ourselves.
When the rival fans, they go, well, you sign them or you sign the other. See that that someone at this latest charge, it just sounds like we've got the builders in next door.
It does, yeah. If you can hear any noises, by the way, it's the builders next door.
Yeah, it's not my stomach rumbling. I make sure I had a butty before we came in here. But yeah, like if you look at the sheet from last season, players like Amadou Anana becoming about 33.5 million, highly structured, and Dwight McNeil about 20 million, stuff like that. And then Anthony Gordon was sold in the January transfer window. The way it goes at the moment with the current rules, homegrown players are a pure profit when you sell them, which is a bit of an interesting rule in itself, and almost like you're being incentivized to sell your homegrown players. So when you do sign a player, that cost of the transfer is actually spread over the length of the contract, and it's hence why Chelsea getting round it was signing all these players and getting them on really long contracts. So if you had somebody like Anana, say for argument's sake 30 million on a 5-year contract, that only goes down to 6 million on your balance sheet, whereas Gordon is sold for pure profit, whether that's 40 million rising to 45 million. So it's not like Everton were going out there and in the way like Nottingham Forest were just signing all these players for big money. The net spend is actually really low in recent seasons, and like I said, with these rival fans saying, "Oh well, Everton signed all these players." Well, they didn't. If you look at what obviously you're in the Premier League, you're not just going to pick everybody up on a free transfer. They didn't seem to be reckless in the way that they were operating. They've been actually working in conjunction with the Premier League for a long time before all these charges hit, and they were being very careful to make sure that they did remain within the parameters. So that's the huge frustration for Blues. Is when the fingers being pointed like, oh, Everton didn't put the brakes on and they carried on spending. But when you actually look at the balance sheet, is actually one of the lowest net spend. So it just seems a ridiculous argument when people say, oh, well, they did spend this money to stay up, and after you got the rival clubs who were involved and the ones who went down last season. But no, it just doesn't hold water, and that's one of the obviously the huge frustrations from an Everton point of view, is this idea that they've continued to spend recklessly when you look at the realities of the balance sheet, they haven't done.
On to the next subplot of this topic then, with or without this transfer ban, if it comes to fruition, and the Premier League and the independent panel see fit to award Everton another punishment. Everton have got a couple of players out of contract in the summer, which is not ideal. Each summer I'm sure there are players out of contract, but if we list the players now, it probably wouldn't have too much of a massive impact if these players were to be released and let go. But there are some where you would put question marks on. So obviously Dele Alli, is not featuring at all. Even without the transfer ban, I'd assume his contract would just expire. The next one is Andre Gomez.
Yeah.
The next one is Idrissa Gueye. Then we've got Ashley Young, squad goalkeeper Andy Lonergan, and then club captain Seamus Coleman. So it's not like, you wouldn't say it's like the core squad, but there are players who are featuring for Everton at this moment in time, and questionable whether they want to stay themselves.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the transfer ban, obviously they wouldn't be able to bring in new players. That'd be the concern. You look at the ones who are those ones who are going out of contract, and imagine there could be a new deal there for Seamus Coleman if he wants it. Ashley Young, to be fair, despite his age, has actually figured more than anybody at right back this season. I know he's been out injured for the last month, but see potential there. And obviously, Idrissa Gueye might end up signing maybe for another year. But those other ones, Andy Lonergan hasn't played for the club, has he? Delhi, I'd imagine, would go, and as well as Andre Gomes has done in recent weeks, I'd imagine it'd be time for him to move on as well. So there are some big wages there to be cleared off the books when Delhi goes, when Andre Gomes presumably goes. I'm not sure on Idrissa Gueye, but you might be, say, for argument's sake, if Everton were to get a transfer ban, perhaps it would have been time for Idrissa Gueye to sort of to be phased out, but they might be forced to retain him, because if they can't get anybody else in, then you're gonna be struggling, aren't you? And you suppose Idrissa Gueye is a proven player in that position, so it sort of it could potentially hamper the ambitions of sort of reshaping the squad. But yeah, there's some big earners on that list. But it would be frustrating if you couldn't reinvest that money saved by those wages on some young players that Sean Dyche and Kevin Felwell might fancy.
Who would you let go then, and or who would you want to offer new contracts to?
I'd give Coleman a new deal, regardless of whether he's playing regularly or not. I think he, so obviously he's just broken the club's Premier League appearance record, and it's quality rather than quantity for Coleman now, appearance-wise. I mean, he's got a few more sort of club legends on the horizon. I think he has the potential next season, if he was to stay on, to break into the top 10 and even go beyond the likes of Dixie Dean. So obviously Coleman will be worth a new deal. I mean, Andy Lonergan, if he wants to stick around as number 3, either way. I suppose a big one for Ashley Young could go either way for the second half of the season. He's been a regular for the first half of the season. I know the jury's out in terms of how much better he necessarily is than the likes of Nathan Patterson, given that Coleman was injured for a lot of that period. I think that one could go either way, as could Gueye, which I think depends on whether Everton would get a transfer ban or not. I think if Everton were able to sign new players, they might decide, well, thank you, Idrissa Gueye, for a couple of years back at the club in the second spell, but go separate ways now. But they might be forced to try and offer him a new deal should he want to stay on if they were to have the ban, whereas I would imagine Andre Gomes, like I said, has done well, but I think it'd be time for him to go. And poor Delhi, all these well-documented off-the-field issues, and also the fact that he's hampered by this highly structured deal, which kick in payments when he plays, I think it's 7 more games, something like that. Just think the combination of all those issues, unfortunately, mean that there's no long-term career for him at Everton.
I think the Coleman one probably makes sense. We obviously know he's getting on a little bit now, and his injury issues are, probably coming to the fore a little bit more. He's not going to be able to play every week, but we obviously do have a Nathan Patterson who, Gav Buckland said on the latest podcast that the jury's still out on Nathan Patterson, which is fair enough. I think, there is still questions to be answered over whether he's going to be Everton's long-term right back. Hope he is, but I think the midfield probably is the one that concerns me. Gomez has come into the fore unexpectedly, but it's fantastic that he has, and it's fortunate that he has, because Abdoulaye Doucouré's been injured, and I don't know really what we would have done if Andre Gomes hadn't come back in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very opportune moment for Andre. He'd been out in the cold for 19 months, hadn't played since he got the hook in that Crystal Palace 3-2 game. Obviously, he went off when Everton were losing at half time, and then he had a loan spell at Lille for a year, so he'd been totally out the picture. Came back at Tottenham just before Christmas, scored a great goal, and he set one up as well, but that one got disallowed for Calvin Phillips. Very unfortunate, because DCL's barren streak continues. That might have all changed if that wouldn't have been given. So as well as Gomes has done, I think that he's a player on big wages, and it'd be a chance to move him on. But the central midfield is a concern, especially FC. We know there's been a lot of admiring glances for Amadou Anana, long-term interest from the likes of Arsenal and Manchester United. Even if who knows? But I wouldn't imagine a deal will get done this month. But they might come knocking in the summertime, and similar to his compatriot Romelu Lukaku, there's a lot of people within the Amadou Anana camp seem to always have at least one eye on what his next move might be. So if an offer comes around for him, it's all well and good if you cashing in on somebody like Anana, but it's no good if you can't actually spend it. Suddenly you've got whatever, say for argument's sake, 60 million in the bank, and you can't do anything with it because you're hit by a transfer ban. Well, maybe better on actually holding on to the player. But yeah, the central midfield is a concern. James Garner's come on leaps and bounds this season, but I say Idrissa Gueye's not getting any younger there. The question marks over Anana. It could be an area where Everton want to reshape things, and that can't happen if there's a transfer ban in place.
I mean, the the Anana one could be an insane situation where if we do get this transfer ban and an offer comes in for Anana, you've suggested obviously two scenarios. We keep him because we can't afford to let him go, as in because we need the squad depth. But we sell him, get like 60, 70, 80 million for him, but we can't spend the money. Yeah. But like if we were to keep him, you would suggest maybe his valuation would maybe drop a little bit because he's got 1 year less on his contract. Would he be deemed as a successful season following on? So this profits and sustainability rule is just causing havoc all over the show, and it's really doing the opposite of what it should be set out to do.
Yeah, like you said, the idea that it promotes the idea that sell your homegrown assets, you sell them for pure profit, but. Yeah, it's causing all kinds of trouble. Cause like I said, we've seen the January spending is just down by a lot across the board. I think other clubs sailing close to the wind. Amadou, like we said with Amadou and Anana, I think Arsenal quite fancy signing him this window, but they probably hampered in terms of their financial fair play and how close they are to the limit. I mean, yeah, it would be ironic in that if Everton were hit by the ban, it might mean that they've said, well, sorry, Amadou, you've got to stay regardless now because you can't get anybody else in there. I understand that he is very highly rated within the club. It was interesting when we got to the halfway point of this season, tossed up all the average ratings for the Everton players from the Echo player ratings on a game-to-game basis. Anana was actually quite low down. He averaged, I think, just over 6 or something like that. And there's about 15 players above him and the ratings. And just got a feeling he could do a lot more. I mean, to be fair, he started 2024 a lot better, more promising displays there. Just think there's such a big talent in there. But I understand that people within the club, they really rate it. They think he can come on leaps and bounds. And when there was some reported interest from Manchester United last summer, and they are long-term admirers of him, that... I was told that people within the club think in time he can be just as good as Moises Caicedo, if not better. And if you consider that Caicedo went to Chelsea for 115 million last summer, I'm not saying that Everton are going to get 9 figures for Amadou Anana, but that's the fear, is that if he does move on, he could blossom into this sort of world-class player elsewhere. So, if the time comes that Everton do have to cash in on Anana, it's got to be on their terms, and hopefully they would get a large amount, because obviously they've already paid, I think I understand, about 33.5 million, and I think that both Lille and in turn even possibly Hamburg might be due some cash as a sell on there. So you're not going to get the full amount. So it would have to be a large amount.
Everton FC on YouTube says, let's face it, we are practically on a transfer ban anyway. We can't spend anything and we still owe for Beto, as well as a fine due to revenue from league position, plus the 10 points. It's a triple whammy. It is, isn't it, really?
Yeah, that's what we had. Similar, wasn't it? Similar comment from one of the previous contributors. Yeah, it's not like Everton is all of a sudden going to go from spending loads to not being able to spend anything at all. Yeah, they've been... very prudent in recent windows, and even, like I said, big money outlays for Beto have been highly structured, and Kalvin Phillips sort of alluded to that himself in terms of money being paid at a future date rather than a large sort of base amount straight away. So yeah, it's not like they're going to go from like Chelsea when they got hit by their transfer ban, from regularly breaking the bank to having nothing at all. I think they've been used to cutting the cloth accordingly, but no, it's just a time of this whole thing as well, in terms of next season's going to be Goodison Park's final season. So first and foremost, it'd be an absolute travesty if Goodison Park, the ground, English football's first purpose-built stadium, and the ground that just hosted more top-flight matches anywhere else If that was to be spent out in the Premier League, that'd be a travesty. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But then if Goodison's final season and it's hit by other issues like this, like the transfer ban, or you know, who knows? No, Everton could be all right this season, but hit by a transfer ban if things were to go on a downturn next season, and then you're going into the season where they move to Bramley Moor Dock and the new stadium. I mean, that's awful too. So yeah, just what should be a time for celebration and time for Evertonians after such a long period of frustration and tough times for a generation now, coming up to 29 years since the last trophy win. It should be the time when Everton are looking forward to the future and rather than reflecting on a glorious past which is now long gone, just looking forward to the future with optimism and a bright start for the new club. But just dreadful time, and they're not even able to enjoy as much as we like seeing them. We lap them up all the issues of the pictures, of the stadium, the new stadium, and the progress. And if taken in isolation, they're absolutely fantastic. I love all that side of things, but it's just all hampered by this mess which is going on off the field at the club at the moment. And I just wish that the timing could be so very different, so you can actually enjoy this period. But unfortunately, Blues can't do, and that's been going on for a couple of years, and continues now.
Well, we're getting loads of questions in, loads of statements in, loads of opinions. So just a reminder, continue to do so. I am going to try and get through them all as soon as I can and as many as possible. So, Chris, is the back and forth world of the transfer window, it's also worth pointing out that Danjuma and Jack Harrison will return to their respective clubs in the summer. So there's two players also lost. We know Danjuma hasn't featured much anyway. Jack Harrison, being a mainstay in Sean Dyce's team, so he would be considered a miss. But we're also worth mentioning that Neil Maupay and Mason Holgate would potentially return to the club. So the back and forth world of the transfer window strikes again. It's 4 players there, going separate ways, but who could have an influence on Everton's future in the next couple of certainly short-term future and long-term future.
Yeah, Danjuma is an interesting one because obviously we understand Villarreal, perhaps understandably, are concerned about his lack of playing time at Everton. It has gone up a little bit in recent weeks, but was telling that he didn't start the FA Cup replay. It's one of the things with the way that Sean Dyche operates. He's got a small squad anyway, but he doesn't like to tinker and change the team around too often anyway. So Danjuma was understandably frustrated about his lack of minutes. We understand that Leon, with his representatives, have reached out and have got a deal in place if Everton did want to let go. But from my understanding, Everton's position is that he's part of Sean Dyche's plans and they want him to remain where he is. I think it's doubtful that he will be at Everton beyond this season, but given that bodies are so light at Everton, they wouldn't want to lose him this window, because I think you'd really struggle to get somebody of comparable sort of quality in as a replacement, certainly at this late stage. So let's see. I think that Everton want to hold on to him certainly for the rest of the season, but I think it's doubtful beyond then, unless he has some incredible second half of the season, comes on leaps and bounds. Whereas Jack Harrison's very different, isn't he? Like you say, he's been more or less playing all the time since he got himself fit on that right wing. I'm too sure in terms of the clauses there. If Everton stay up and if Leeds United don't come up, I think there's a fair chance, if the money is there and the transfer ban isn't, that Jack Harrison could stay on and become an Everton player permanently. Neil Maupay, he seems to have burnt his bridges.
It's a no from me.
Yeah. He's made a few comments, hasn't he? Since I mean, obviously it was tough for him, and he got some stick from certain quarters, which was beyond the pale. But what was it? Something like 30 games, 1 goal, just didn't work for him, and a lot of that wasn't necessarily Maupay's fault. He was playing in a system that he wasn't used to. He was always at his best, it seemed, when he had a strike partner alongside him. That was never the case at Everton, and he was anything but a like-for-like replacement for Dominic Calvert-Lewin. So for a multitude of reasons, didn't happen for him at Everton, and he's made a few comments since then. He's been on loan at Brentford. They do have an option to make that one a permanent. I mean, they might not fancy it if he doesn't do as well as they'd hope, but obviously he scored a couple of goals now. So if he's Brentford's player, if they want him, but I just don't see him coming back and playing for Everton. Stranger things have happened. I think Alex and Yarko ended up coming back all those years ago after he infamously left the pitch at Arsenal. So we don't know with that one, but yeah, I wouldn't imagine he'd be back, and it was the other one. Oh, Mason Holgate. I was actually been linked with a move to Sheffield United today, which is very interesting. And if you consider, there's a couple of big factors here in this one. Obviously, he's on loan at Southampton. He would have seen that as being the opportunity for him to relaunch his career after it surplus requirements at Everton. I think he started 5 games in the Championship all season. Hasn't featured in the Championship since November. His only appearance since then was an FA Cup game where he played at right back. Not part of their plans, but it's not the case of Everton just bring him back and send him somewhere else. His wages are being subsidised by Southampton. It's got to be in Everton's interest. So any interested party would have to pay the difference, and possibly that Southampton end up paying a bit themselves just to get him out of there and get free up options in their squad. So it's got to be right for Everton. Everton won't be wanting to make a loss in terms of his wages, but also, if he was to go to Sheffield United, it might suit him personally. He's a South Yorkshire lad. He's going back to where his roots there. But would Everton really want to sell him to, or loan him out to a rival, given that obviously so many permutations at the bottom, and we don't quite know where anyone stands. But Sheffield United are a club below Everton in the table. Would you really want to strengthen one of your rivals? So I'm not sure whether Kevin Fell will give the green light to that one. I suppose it all comes down to money again. But yeah, that one's maybe not straightforward at all.
Key question, definitely. But just wanted you to get an answer from, if it was regardless. Say we didn't get the transfer ban, so Everton was straightforward. Harrison. Is he a yay or a nay from you, or is it too early to decide?
George, I'd be leaning towards yay. I know he seems to frustrate a lot of the time in that he can drift out for games for me. He's clearly very gifted. We saw obviously like a strike against Bournemouth. How many players within the Everton squad could have been capable of a finish like that? Obviously, he got one against Man City as well. That's a bit of a close range effort. So he does offer a threat in the final third of the pitch. Yeah, I'd like to see before the end of the season. I know he seems to fit the Dyce style. Dyce likes the way he would put in a shift, and maybe in elements of his game that don't come as naturally for him, he'll track back and help out in that respect. He can certainly put a cross in. He can do that. He's shown that on a number of occasions. I'd just like to see. I suppose it's the sort of nature of wingers. They do tend to drift in and out of games. Just like to see him involved a bit more within games, rather than it can somehow how it seems to drift away from him at times. But yeah, that one could go either way. But at the moment, I think positive enough to suggest the signs that you'd want to make that permanent come the summer if he was to have a good second half of the season.
And for me, his final ball and end product just seemed to be slightly lacking as well, with crosses into the box when we've got a Dominic Calvert-Lewin in spearheading the attack, who who can be instrumental when he gets the ball in the 6-yard box as well. But Chris, just an interesting point as well that you touched upon, which I have got down on me list of questions. So it goes hand in hand with the transfer ban if it was to come to fruition. But Dyce likes a small squad. Yeah. Why? What's the philosophy behind it? We know why Everton have got a small squad anyway, because of the situation they find themselves in. But suggestion, and you've even said there that it suits Dyce better anyway.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, there's the practicality of the whole situation. This isn't Chelsea now, when Everton have got a small pool of players now, so that is just the reality of the situation. But I think that does, they say, suit him. Again, in his previous time at Burnley, where he was for 9.5 years, it was probably a similar scenario there, in that he was operating in the Premier League's smallest market and one of the lowest budgets, so he probably had a similar situation there. Obviously, he didn't have an embarrassment of riches, so he would, again, from a practical point of view, he'd have to operate with a small squad. But I think from his own personal viewpoint, he likes to go with players who he feels he can trust. Ashley Young, certainly one of them, for all that you think about Ashley Young, or the pluses and minuses. You've got to earn his trust. He's respecting that side of things, so he likes people he knows he can depend upon. And I think he genuinely thinks that with the disruption of things of chopping and changing, it's interesting because, like I said, that I'm a huge fan of Dyche. That'd be my priority number one. Hand him a long-term contract to make sure he's at Everton for a long time. I think he's a great fit for Everton, and in terms of not just the results, just the way he carries himself and the values that he places. But one thing which is interesting now that we live in the 5 substitution era, where you can, in theory, change half of your outfield every single Premier League game, is that he is reticent to use the subs, and that's what part of the problem with Dan Juma's not always been getting looking. Also, Lewis Dommer's been getting the nod when he has been using the subs ahead of Dan Juma sometimes. But yeah, I think he genuinely thinks that it can disrupt a lot of his methods are implemented about the shape of the team and how you set up. And I think if you start chopping and changing too much, that disrupts that. And he likes that continuity, which goes with it. Didn't he famously? I don't know if it was the first time it had happened, or when there was a Burnley game, and he actually, even in the squad number era, they named the team. It went 1 to 11,
Right.
and that was sort of indicative of the way Dyche operates there in terms of just wanting to stay with that core 11 who he trusts.
Old school.
Yeah, but I like that. I think that's not a problem for me. In fact, I'd have been more old school than Dyche, and I wasn't happy when he's changed the keeper around for the cup, even though João Virginia got a couple of clean sheets and produced a couple of sort of top-notch performances. Certainly vindicated that decision in that respect. But yeah, I don't think old school is a negative for me. There's a few Everton Dars might agree with me there. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Those old school values. Obviously, the game's changing, society's changing, but don't mean that those traditional approaches are just got thrown in the bin. I think there's a lot to be said for them. But it is interesting, yeah, that like I say in the 5 sub era that he does seem so reticent to sort of shuffle the pack on occasions. But he's got his vindications for that. He feels that he likes that continuity.
Okay, just a final point on this topic before we move on. The only other time, and I think it's the only other time, the last time a transfer ban has happened in the Premier League is on Chelsea.
Yeah.
And just reading through, little bits and doing research, it's got to be stated that there is actually no set Premier League template for any punishments on this. So surprise, surprise, on that one. But the Premier League didn't actually set this. It was give Chelsea the transfer ban. It was FIFA.
Okay.
So what but kind of once again we're going to be at the mercy of the Premier League and the independent panel, because there's no set framework for a punishment of any of this kind.
Yeah, we don't know, do you? That's all. Everything and nothing. Who knows what could happen? Like I said, how that actually be. I mean, can you not sign anybody? Can you sign free transfers? I must admit, I don't know what you can do and what they can't do. Maybe there isn't a clear framework in there. Wasn't it Frank Lampard? Was it when he was at Chelsea and they had the transfer ban, and that's what he was bringing through the youngsters at that time. People like Mason Mount were coming through. So, and that's another thing for it's happened today. Frank Lampard, obviously speaking about his time at Everton, described last January as being like the Wild West. So yeah, there's just so many things that you just can't envisage at this particular stage. I'd say that just the overriding feeling was, it would potentially be very significant for Everton if they were to get a transfer ban. It's not going to be good. It's not like they can sort of brush it off as, okay, well, we've only been signing players for not so much anyway. I think given that the situation that presents itself in terms of restructuring the squad, it's going to have serious ramifications. We can say that without necessarily knowing the ins and outs of what might be coming Everton's way. But yeah, like you said, there's just so many things up in the air at the moment. It's really sort of difficult for any of us to predict with any sort of certainty just what things might be like in 6 months' time.
Yeah, just Mike on YouTube's asked why all the talk of the transfer ban all of a sudden. Questions: has the media been briefed? But obviously, Joe Thomas wrote a piece about it earlier in the week, and even before that there could be a punishment for it, and that could be fitting for the punishment that they're going to receive.
Yeah, like I said, throwing Joe under the bus with this one. It was his story. I don't know what Joe's been told or not told, like we discussed at the start, and I was over in Copenhagen on my winter break. But no, on a serious point, it has to be one of the alternatives. If Everton were to get the points back or some of the points back, it's one of the things. I think it's one of the things that the club have even discussed themselves at briefings, that is an alternative rather than the points, that it is one of the other sanctions as seen as rather than an on the pitch sanction. I mean, it's still affecting the football side of the business, very much so. But rather than an on-field sanction of actual punishments for a financial breach, it's hitting the club from a financial, for in terms of a trading point of view. So yeah, it's definitely one of the things that is on the table and has always been on the table in this respect.
Okay, just a couple of questions then. So the Blues on YouTube, I think we've kind of touched upon this one already, Chris, but he's just said it's regarding the small squad and how Dyce likes it. Is it a case that Dyce likes a small squad, or is it a byproduct of the managers managing a skin club, basically? So I think we kind of...
Yeah, I think it's, but like we said already, Ian, I think it's both, isn't it? It's what he's known from Burnley, it's what he knows at Everton, and it's the way he likes to go about things.
And JEFC 1969 on YouTube has said regarding Harrison, I'd try and get a better player than Harrison if that is possible. 100% effort, but lacks sufficient quality. Again, I think we kind of touched upon that. I think we obviously missed these questions as they were coming in, but just catching up on them now. But I think I've said, you said you like Harrison. I like Harrison, but I do think his end product is poor, and it's probably why he's playing for a club like Leeds and Everton. Really, all the endeavour and effort that he puts in. But we'll, room for improvement. Let's see how he goes in the second half of the season.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on then from this transfer ban, because we don't know exactly what's going on, because this appeals process is just going to run and run. But some transfer news and transfer rumours then. Anana, the Telegraph reported yesterday that Newcastle have been linked with him. He was kind of linked last week as well, and they're suggesting that Almiron is going to be sold to push this transfer of Anana. I mean, they've got all the money in the world, Chris, Newcastle, but they obviously can't spend it, so they're having to sell players as well to fund transfers.
It's all a bit iffy, isn't it? That the Saudi-owned Newcastle United, they have to sell Almiron to the Saudis and to push through another deal. Yeah, I don't know. I don't. This could be the last chance to sort of get a bargain from Everton, but just how much of a just how good is it for Everton if they were to sell Anana in the last week of the window? Well, we've already talked about the issues in central midfield. For all the money not all the money in the world, but I just don't see how this get the green light from Everton at this stage of the transfer window. Possibly the goalpost change in the summer. You could see it happening, but I don't see what there is to be gained from Everton doing this, because it's not like you have a fire sale and all Everton's financial issues are all okay and tickety-boo because they sold somebody in January, because all that's being taken care of, that's being looked at now. It doesn't change what's being looked at already. What's done is done. So personally, I don't see how that one gets over the line. Certainly, it doesn't seem to make much logic from an Everton point of view at this stage.
We've just had some responses back from the answers that we've given. So Mike on YouTube said, thanks for answering, but it seems really unlikely to me that they would set precedent for breach 1 of being points deduction, then decide breach 2 is worthy of a different sanction completely. So I don't think he's far off in what he's saying, but I just think everything's so up in the air. We just don't know what's going to happen, do we?
But what they might say is that, as Everton have argued, that the 10-point deduction is unjust and wholly inappropriate. Well, if they say, okay, yeah, for want of a better word, the original panel made such a pig's ear in the first lot that we're throwing that out and we're going to do something else. I mean, that could happen. You say, okay, yeah, points deduction is ridiculous. We're not going to do that. I'm going to hit you some other way. It could happen that way. But I'm like everyone, we're just speculating on this. We hear so much about it, and we get briefed about it. Perhaps I might know the bit more than some of the readers, but we're all hearing so many things from so many angles. I mean, it's a viable alternative, I would imagine.
Yeah, and obviously, as soon as we get the answers to this, like every other media outlet, I'm sure we're going to bring you it as soon as possible. Whether that's on the Echo website or whether that's via our podcasts on YouTube, Facebook, iTunes, or Spotify. So just also as well, Chris, the Blues on YouTube. The Harrison question. He's agreed on Harrison. He said most wide players are inconsistent, and he does lack pace, which probably he isn't wrong. Okay, next transfer rumour then that I've seen today that was put in the blog, the Everton FC blog on the Echo website by Paul Wheelock. Ben Godfrey to Leeds. Anything in that, do you think?
Well, Ben Godfrey's been getting a lot of interest, hasn't he? I know that Tottenham were looking around, Atalanta, they couldn't get that one to work. He's certainly not getting a look in at Everton, is he?
And rightly so, though, to be fair, with the the partnership of Branthwaite and Tarkowski.
And then even at left back, where he's kind of produced, I would argue, his best performances, not necessarily last season, but in previous years. Vitaly Mikalenko's come on leaps and bounds, so yeah, it's difficult for him to get him there. And Michael Keane's probably first reserve in terms of the centre back options if for whatever reason Branthwaite or Tarkowski isn't available, or they do go with three at the back. So yeah, it's very difficult to get it. Ben Godfrey, it's a great shame when he first came into the club. You thought, such a athletic player, came as a centre back, and he always says, he's a centre back first and foremost. He's had probably more outings, I would imagine, off the top of my head, at full back than centre back, and because of that athleticism and the pace, he was able to go up and down. I know his old man was a rugby league player, and it's almost like you're thinking maybe he'd be better at that sport. He was so great getting up and down the line, but he sort of seen himself as the ball playing centre back, and yeah, like I said, he certainly can't get in a look in at Everton, but it all depends whether Sean Dyche feels he can. He's got enough options there, because you're okay, aren't you, if everyone's fit? If Tarkowski, to be fair, what did he play, about 30 games plus for Burnley, like 4 years in a row? I think, no, sorry, it was like 30 games plus 5 years in a row, and I think he did 35 games plus over 4 years. So he's shown a great degree of consistency over a number of years in terms of getting himself on the pitch and getting fit, retaining his fitness. So you've got to hope that he's all right. Branthwaite had a knock last summer before he came back to Everton, but has played most of the games since he came into the side. If they're fit, well, you can probably go without Ben Godfrey. You don't need him there as a fourth choice centre back, but it only takes something to happen to him, or even something to happen to Michael Keane, and you're down to the bare bones. You don't have anybody else, and that's the issue. I'm sure that Ben Godfrey would probably fancy this move, or fancy a move to try and be playing more regularly, and obviously he's a Yorkshire lad, and again we're talking about Mason Holgate and Sheffield United, he'd be going back there, so there's all that sort of thing, and Leeds United, big club outside the Premier League with aspirations to get back there, but just how light do you leave Everton? It's an issue. If everyone's fit, well, you can probably go that second half of the season without him, but it only takes one injury and then Everton are in trouble. So it's a tough one. It's a big one to call, really, for Felwell and Dyche.
Well, that situation's already happened this season when we played Burnley.
Yeah,
both played very well, but it still happens. Yeah. Godfrey and Keane had to come in.
Yeah.
Another player then, not an Everton player, but he has been linked with Everton, and he seems to be, if not already, at West Ham. Kalvin Phillips, a little bit gutted that we've maybe potentially missed out on him, because I do think he's a top player. He obviously hasn't worked out for him at Manchester City, but I think it's you see this type of thing happen all the time to English players, more predominantly than ever. They have a good season with maybe the parent club, they end up going to City, Arsenal, Man United, whatever, for big money deals, and it more often with City it seems to happen, but it obviously hasn't worked out. Guardiola's actually come out and said publicly he's not wanted at City, so a loan deal at West Ham. Have Everton missed out on a top player here?
They missed out, and there was genuine interest. I did a piece in our transfer diary last week. I said that there was actually a lot of reasons why a temporary switch to Everton would have made sense for Phillips. He could have done that without moving house, and it would have been a decent move for him. But I always thought there was a lot of that's why it was unlikely in terms of the finances. Again, we're talking about the money side of things. Okay, you're only getting him on loan, but he'll be commanding some significant wages at City, and I imagine that the finances always kept this one out of reach for Everton. And obviously it's David Moyes who could potentially reap the benefits there. I think he's potentially very good player who's obviously looking for a clean slate and an opportunity to revive his career both for club and country.
Okay, so we are going to talk about Luton. Obviously, massive game on Saturday in the FA Cup, 4th round. But before we do, Chris, just want to talk about Frank Lampard. Obviously, yesterday, a year to the day that he was sacked. Lampard really a gamble that never paid off.
Yeah, and it had to be a gamble at that stage. I don't know what the alternatives were. I mean, at the time, I was remembering.
Sean Dyche.
Well, to be fair, Dyce was still in a job at Burnley, so yeah, he wouldn't have been. He was actually doing his best to get Everton down and keep Burnley up at that particular moment. I'd have gone for Dyche back in 2017 when Ronald Koeman was sacked, but we're sort of getting off the point here. Yeah, the alternatives were probably Wayne Rooney was touted. He was one who I was speaking up for Rooney at the time, and it's not gone well for him since DC United and obviously Birmingham City, and it was going to be a gamble. Whatever you think about Frank Lampard, lovely man, decent man, a gentleman, one of the most intelligent people in football, and as a player, one of the greatest talents of the modern era from England. A genuinely world-class player with an eye for a goal from midfield. So we all know what he brought as a player. There's no questions there. Obviously, broke Evertonians' hearts in the 2009 FA Cup final when I was down at Wembley for that one. So we all know about Frank Lampard, the player. But as a manager, sort of a mixed bag at Derby County and Chelsea. He's kind of done all right and hadn't done amazing, but certainly hadn't done awful. But when he came to Everton that first year, united the fan base at a crucial moment, obviously after Rafael Benitez, which was a ridiculous appointment despite what you think of his past managerial record. And he was the unanimous choice of the Everton board at the time, of both of the owner Farhad Moshiri, late chairman Bill Kenwright, Denise Barrett-Baxendale et al. They all wanted Lampard, and he did just about enough that first year to get them over the line. Obviously, the sterling efforts of the Evertonians off the pitch to improve the team, but I think the wheels came off after that double header at Bournemouth. I was one of those unfortunate ones. At least I wasn't paying like all those Blues to get down there, but Joe and I did those 2 trips to Bournemouth in 4 days, 1,000 miles there and back for 2 3-goal defeats, and after that World Cup break, it never got any better for him. Just got worse, and make no bones about it, Everton were heading for a first relegation in 72 years on Frank Lampard's watch. Whatever you think of Frank Lampard, I'm convinced that was happening. Unfortunately, he had to go. There's been a lot of debate since about when was the right time to do it. Some people said after the Bournemouth, but I think you're sort of looking retrospectively at the issue if you say that. I mean, it was only a week before Everton had the potential to go in the top half of the table, so okay, that was the beginning of the end for Lampard, the Bournemouth. But I personally, I think the Brighton game was the one when I'd have made the decision, but he limped on until after West Ham United.
Well, it's because we had the draw against City. Probably papered over the cracks, doesn't it?
Possibly, looking back on it. You had the draw at City, and then I think it was the Brighton game after that, and then was it the FA Cup game possibly at Manchester United. But yeah, like we said, Frank Lampard, the man, I'm sure everyone got glowing sort of comments on him, and we saw he was up at the cathedral when Joe and I were at the cathedral for Bill Kenwright's memorial service. He was there that day. So obviously it touched him a lot at that time at Everton. He had a genuine bond with the fans. He was a very popular man, but just couldn't get it to work. And to be fair, what Sean Dyche has done in very difficult circumstances since sort of doesn't paint Lampard in a great light either. I mean, and also what he did when he went back to Chelsea as caretaker. That one was messy as well, wasn't it? They hardly won a game when he went back. So, yeah, I don't know where Frank Lampard's managerial career goes from now. Certainly, I mean, I might be wrong. I thought after Marco Silva was sacked, we won't see him in English football again. And look what he's done at Fulham. He's done a great job, to be fair. But yeah, I don't know where Lampard goes from now. But yeah, he's been talking about that, hasn't he? He was on the podcast this last 24 hours, and he describes Everton's January transfer window last year as being like the Wild West, and the whole sort of dynamic between Kenwright and Denise Barrett-Baxendale on one side, and trying to keep the owner Farhad Moshiri in check. It's a very interesting points that he makes. We've got an article on that if you want to check that one out. But yeah, Frank Lampard, great man, but serious question marks over his managerial ability, which is a shame given that what he was like as a player. But great players don't always make great managers.
Described on social media yesterday by some as Everton's worst ever manager. The stats suggest he's Everton's second worst ever manager. Is that a bit harsh? Is he, should he feel a little bit aggrieved or any sympathy for him? We obviously did go into a football club all over the place.
If you look at what he's achieved at his other clubs, you could argue that he was Everton's worst ever manager in that. I mean, who's he up against? Mike Walker. Mike Walker took Norwich City into Europe, so that's a bit different taking Norwich City into Europe than Chelsea with their riches. Even if Lampard did start out with the transfer ban there, so yeah, he's got to be talked about in that conversation. Unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, when you look at even Rafael Benitez, as much as I would argue, and a lot of people would argue, should have never been there. At least he had a glittering CV from earlier on in his career. So yeah, I think unfortunately Lampard vindicated in that conversation. And like I said, the work that Sean Dyche has done since on a shoestring budget with a lot of the similar players sort of doesn't paint Lampard in a better light.
We'll always have Palace then, I suppose, won't we?
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, that was obviously a memorable moment. The only thing I would say is that it didn't fit right for me the way that was sort of, it was up on the walls at Finch Farm, and I think they've probably taken those down now. But as much as, of course, celebrate in the moment, but don't have it up on the wall like it was one of the club's great nights in their histories. Enjoying the moment, rightly so. I don't like it when people sort of look sneeringly like, oh, look at Everton celebrating staying up. Yeah, of course, enjoying the moment, but yeah, Everton Football Club's got to be about a lot much more than just staying up.
We've got a few more questions, which I'm going to get to right at the end, but Chris, we're just going to really finish off with Luton and the FA Cup fourth round. So at the end of the day, it's just nice to be in the cup, have some sort of interest in the FA Cup, and it's at home tie at Goodison Park. Yeah,
there's a few elements here, like you say. Nice just to talk about football. We'll get a token 2 minutes, maybe talk about football at the end there. Yeah, but yeah. It's supposed to be a football reporter, but yeah, to talk about games of football, we've sort of talked about it fleetingly, haven't we? But yeah, there's good habits, that some people have said there's so much going on in the Premier League this year for Everton, and I understand all this, and ultimately that has to be the priority. But I think that a cup run can generate momentum, generates a feel-good factor. It gets you, as Sean Dyche would say, in good habits of winning football. Matches treated seriously and just see how far you can go. I'm always banging on about this, the importance for Everton Football Club to be winning trophies, or at least trying to win trophies, because if a club Everton over the years, only Manchester United and Liverpool have won trophies in more decades than Everton, so over 9 separate decades, so you're going over like 100-year period. They've never sort of dominated one area of the game, but they've always been there or thereabouts, to lifting trophies on a regular basis, and that's gone now over this last generation. Of the whole generation of Evertonians have grown up. I mean, you're a touch younger than me, aren't you, Ian, I think? But, I can remember the 1995 FA Cup win.
I can remember that. I was young.
Yeah, but...
I was 8. I think I was 8.
Yeah, so anyone a bit younger than us, they ain't got nothing.
It's obviously an interesting point, because I always look at the decades.
Yeah.
And, the success that we've had, and we are considered one of the most successful clubs in England. League titles, FA Cups. But like you say, we've never dominated like constant years. We've obviously had the 80s, which you obviously consider Everton's main glory days.
Yeah.
But literally after the 90s, the noughties and onwards, the noughties was the first decade that we never actually won a trophy, and it's obviously it's continued on.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of that, to be fair, isn't Everton. Well, part of that is Everton's. We could start a whole new podcast now, can't we, on this one? But part of that is Everton's decline. But then I think it's become increasingly difficult for clubs outside of the elite to win trophies, even domestic trophies. There have been years when the likes of Manchester City have sort of hoovered up the lot, or them lot from across the park, they managed to win a couple of cups without even scoring a goal, and a couple of penalty shootouts against Chelsea a couple of years ago. So it's become increasingly difficult for clubs outside that elite to win trophies. So that's happened, and Everton have declined.
Yeah.
So
It's been a double-edged sword,
yeah,
hasn't
yeah.
it?
There's been sort of two things with that, but yeah, no, it's not like Everton are one of the minnows of the game. I think it wouldn't be too much to expect Everton to get to win one cup per decade, something like that, on average, something like that. And the fact that it's coming up to 29 years now, so. Sean Dyche spoken about it. He says, the Premier League's so important now, that has to be the priority, and fans will say because of this year's special, in that there's so much going on, not special in a good way, but because there's so much going on with Everton, sort of don't bother about the cups. But for me, you've always got to give it your best shot, and if you get what is seen to be a winnable tie, this got to go for it. Name your strongest team. I know there's the game at Fulham the following Tuesday. We'll just try and get that momentum going through, and we saw that with the cups, because I think when Everton went out the Carabao Cup, and you and I weren't happy at all with Amadou Anana's penalty that night, that was sort of the burst the bubble of all that momentum they had in early December. Okay, you could say they ran out of legs and they ran into some tougher fixtures in the second half of December, but it would have been interesting if Everton had beaten Fulham. Okay, they got Liverpool in the semi-final, but whether that momentum could have carried on a bit longer if they had have carried on there with the cup. And also, I would say, it's an opportunity to try and get a psychological blow on Luton Town, because as things stand, it's Everton and Luton are obviously third from bottom. Everton just above them. They're sort of in this psychological battle at the bottom, sort of to stay in the Premier League. But if you were to beat Luton and sort of get revenge, because obviously there was that 2-1 defeat that Everton suffered back in the end of September, which was Luton's first ever Premier League win. It was a huge moment for them. It was an opportunity to sort of Everton to strike a blow in terms of the mindset of going into that second half of the season and the relegation battle. If Everton was like give Luton a good eye in the FA Cup or beat them comprehensively, I think it would sort of weigh on the minds. And also, if it went the other way, if Luton were to win again at Goodison Park, I mean, that wouldn't be great from an Everton psychological point of view.
I missed the Luton game. How bad a day was that? I didn't even bother watching it back.
It was a game Everton should have still won, or certainly got something from, I believe. Undone by a couple of set pieces first half. Calvert-Lewin, I think the long VAR delay, as we've seen so many times, but one actually went in Everton's favour. Same as Villa, obviously when Villa had the goal disallowed, but FC long VAR delay, and then the Calvert-Lewin goal got given. You still felt Everton got enough here to come back to go and get something out of the game. And they didn't. It was very frustrating. And now, however, they weren't really knocking on the door that second half. I think I seem to remember they were playing Beto and DCL as a pair in that second half, and it just didn't work out for them. That was probably, to be fair, Dyche's lowest ebb. That was probably when he was feeling the heat the most, because Everton had that rotten home record at the time, still not great, but they've picked up a few wins since. That's probably when people still question marks, a lot of question marks over Dyche, and it was only after the 3-0 win over Bournemouth that things started moving in the right direction. So yeah, it'd be a big moment to try and sort of get one back on to Luton, both to progress in the cup and to sort of strike a psychological blow ahead of the second half of the season with both clubs and the fight to remain in the Premier League.
Yeah, and things have changed massively, haven't they? Obviously, the off the field, issues we've well documented, but Everton, shouldn't be where they are in the league. We should. Luton are a rival now, so as a relegation rival, and they're the only ones who seem to be putting up a fight. But we obviously should be mid-table, and we're not. So Luton are effectively a close competitor. So I think you're spot on. I think it would give a bit of an edge if we can send Luton to the sword, and then just do you think they'll play a strong team as well?
It'd be interesting because maybe for them. Maybe they would go, oh yeah, Premier League is the be-all and end-all for us, because, okay, we're talking about Everton are genuinely in a relegation battle, but only because of the points deduction. So Everton, in terms of ability this season, are a mid-table team, so maybe Luton would bring the changes and see the Premier League very much as their priority. So it's an opportunity there. But the thing about Luton, okay, what they might lack in ability, and I mean obviously they do have players. They've obviously got a couple we know all about, Ross Barkley and Andros Townsend. They seem to have got a lot of spirit in the camp. There's the whole issue with the captain and what went on there and his health issues. Almost seems to have sort of rallied them really in terms of that respect, and there's a lot of spirit within their group. So yeah, it might be important to sort of knock them back down to size, and like I said, and of course it can work the other way if Everton were to win, but were to lose. Sorry, but yeah, I think that could be an interesting one how they approach the game, because for them as a team fighting to stay up for different reasons, because obviously they're just done well just to be here, as opposed to Everton who are thinking they should be above all of this. Their priorities might lie elsewhere, but it'd be interesting to see either way.
Let's pick our starting lineup then. Obviously, injury and fitness pending. I'm going to let you go first because I know we're going to disagree on maybe one or two things. So go on, starting lineup, Chris, for Luton.
Okay. Pickford in goal.
Okay.
But I've got a feeling he'll go with Virginia in game, because Virginia did well in both of their third round games. So,
well, I'm going to interrupt you before you go on with your defence. I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to say Virginia, and I wholeheartedly agree that you should always pick your strongest 11 in the cups, because obviously it's 29 years now since we last won the cup. But Virginia's given me the confidence now in the last two that he is capable of, doing a good job. Yeah. But I also think it's twofold as well. Jordan Pickford, seemingly over the past couple of years, has never had stiff or strong competition. And I'm not criticising Jordan Pickford in any way, but there has been one or two incidents or things this season where it's made me think, you think you are, or you're the number one, and there's no way you're coming out of this team. So it's purely based on, I want Virginia to push Pickford. And then, if we carry on into the next rounds, who knows? But I'm just glad that we've got a second choice goalkeeper who's given us the confidence that he will be able to, man that goal.
Yeah. Okay. It'd be interesting to see who goes right back. Seamus Coleman was injured last week. We had, it'd be a good opportunity for Patterson, for me, a right back for this game. And then I would stick to the regular back four: Mikalenko, Braithwaite, and Tarkowski. In terms of the midfield, again, I'd be interested. The way he was talking, you fear that Abdoulaye Doucouré is not going to be fit, do you, for this one? So you've obviously...
Well, I've left him out of my starting 11 based on the fact that, he was going to be injured.
With the hope that he might be back for Fulham on the Tuesday, but even then we don't know. So yeah, what you're looking at, Garner, Anana, then obviously Gomez, the hero of the last round, does he stay in? I guess he probably does. Patricia Gase still away, is he, at the moment with the AFCON? So yeah, you'd probably have the third round hero, Andre Gomez, possibly staying in there, and then on the wings, Harrison and McNeil be interesting. Obviously, he didn't start with Dan Juma, who'd done well in the first game at Selhurst Park. That he started with McNeil and Harrison for the replay, and then up front DCL, in the hope that he can get another one against Luton, and then that barren streak. But it'd be interesting with the Fulham game the following Tuesday whether he does shuffle his pack. But they've obviously had the rest now. But Ashley Young is coming back into his reckoning as well. So who knows? He might get a start somewhere. Obviously he can fill in a couple of different roles, but yeah, I'd go strong. I'd go with my strongest 11.
Yeah, I think I'm the same back four as you. Anana, Gomez and Garner, Harrison, McNeil and Calvert-Lewin. But I think we touched upon this in the last podcast as well. I think I want to see Lewis Dobbin given a chance, whether that's on the wing or up front, because he has looked dangerous when he's come on, and it's only really been bit parts, and he has made an impact when he's come on as well. So, I would like to see him, given an opportunity. And I think we talked about the stale substitution that, bringing Calvert-Lewin off for Beto. Yeah. Maybe Dobbin is the one to come on for Calvert-Lewin or one of the wingers. Should we need a goal scoring option?
Yeah, certainly it's an opportunity to mix it up, doesn't it? And Dobbin's done well in fits and starts. He's coming on a lot at the start of the season. When he first came in, you thought, well, here's a player who's going to give his all for the club, and obviously he offers a certain amount of pace, but he still looked a bit raw, I thought, at the start of the season. Obviously he'd been playing in League One the previous year, but yeah, he's certainly he's caught the eye at moments, and it would at least give them an opportunity to change things around a bit. But again, I don't know in terms of a shape point of view how open Dyce should be to that idea. But yeah, he's certainly an option.
Predictions then? I'm going to go 2-0 to Everton and into the next round.
I was thinking something similar myself, but just to mix it up then a bit. I mean, I could go one way, I could go 3-0, but no, I'll go for the typical Sean Dyche scoreline then. I was going to say 2-0, but I'll go for 1-0 Everton then.
I'm glad that I got that in first. 1-0 might be too close, especially when there's probably 10 minutes of injury time. Okay, so we're going to finish off now, but just finish off on a couple of questions, Chris. So thanks for everyone who's still listening, still watching on YouTube and Facebook. So Ian Clark on YouTube has said, I don't want 777 at all, but he's also asked or said, there are far too many pundits in the game who used to play for Liverpool. Why? Question mark. And those in positions of power need to be transparent who they favour.
Well, what he makes it, I think that's an age-old question. Like I said, we're starting on a whole new podcast, aren't we? Going about the number of Reds in the media, and it's been that way for a very long time. But yeah, I get where he's coming from in terms of. Obviously, there's a lot of people with vested interest making a lot of points about Everton at the moment. Obviously, they're a hot topic, and like we've discussed already today, you know, it doesn't really stack up. You say, well, Everton spent all this money, and they've cut their cut off accordingly in recent times. So yeah, I can understand his frustration on that score, but I don't think it's really the sort of time now, over an hour into the podcast, for me to be going waxing lyrical about what the reason there's so many former Liverpool players working as pundits. But yeah, it does certainly show you that on a serious point of view, the sort of the sway they can hold with such views.
You are available for a pundit job? No. The half-eaten sandwich on YouTube says, "Hi guys, how can Forest continue to spend on players?" I don't know. Is that are they spending on players?
Well, they've been linked now, aren't they, with Reyna? But that was Gio Reyna and Claudio Reyna's son. But yeah, I don't know if they're up against these sanctions as well. They spent a lot of money last summer. I'm not sure what their outlay was this last 12 months. I mean, maybe they just keep going until they hit trouble. I don't know. That's the problem, isn't it? It opens up the whole Manchester City scenario where you've got an 8 or 9 year period there being looked at, spend. Why is it only being looked at now? It's too late again, and that's another reason why Evertonians feel they're getting the thin end of the wedge.
And I feel bad this was finishing on a negative one, but Rob Fulton on YouTube has said, to be honest, and I feel really bad saying this, but we might be better off going into administration. I don't want 777 anywhere near our club because they'll make things worse than Mashiri did. So, you know, controversial one. I'd probably say administration is the last thing Everton needs. What do you think on that comment?
I can understand what he means, but like I said, it's just... There'd be so
another point deduction.
And all the good work that Sean Dyche had done would be undone if that happened, and it'd be. How could you say that things would come out of it the other side and look good? Yeah, because one of the main points that Everton have been saying is that, look, 10 points is a greater deduction than what Portsmouth got for going into administration, so there's 9 points straight away. So, I mean, even if you take the current 10 points out of the equation, that is I believe, one of the few things that is fixed in terms of what you can do and what you can't do in the Premier League, is that it's 9 points for administration. So if you look at those 9 points and then say the appeal went badly for Everton, 19 points, well, even Sean Dyche isn't going to get that Everton out of that hole. So while I can understand the concerns, or a lot of people got concerns about 777 and all that's gone on with their portfolio of clubs around the world, I just don't see how Everton survive something like that. That's just as much as I understand those concerns about the prospective owners. I just don't know what sort of experience that is going to. Well, I do know it's going to be a bad experience for everyone at Everton. But this is the tough spot that all Blues are in, and the quandary that everyone is facing. I think there's a lot of people have a lot of understandable question marks about 777, but at the moment they seem to be the only party going forward, and that. It was a question of all people. Neville Southall, the great Neville Southall, said last year when the interest, when the deal was first announced with Mashiri, he says he can't understand why there aren't other people coming forward. He would think that with a new stadium, okay, it's got to be paid for, but all the prospects that brings and the potential to improve, that would actually Everton be a good purchase for somebody, and he's just surprised why there aren't other people, serious offers coming in. Which it is, you know, you'd think Everton would offer somebody a great opportunity here. So it does seem odd that they seem to be the only ones at the moment. But I've seen Mashiri had his talks with another American group last year, and that all fell through.
I mean, on the flip side of that, you you might say there are people, consortiums, billionaires waiting in the wings, but they don't support Everton at this time. They might be happy for the club to go into administration and get them on a cuff fee.
Yeah, it's all the fear that you've got, haven't you? The vultures sort of circle, and they will only come in and sort of pick from the carcass. Whereas you want somebody who has got the club's best interests at heart, and it's a shame that other people haven't sort of made their interest known at this stage. But like I say, I think one way or the other, it's got to fall down one way or the other. It can't continue in its current guise indefinitely, and there's to be a point where either 777 get the green light or they don't, and I think that point is rapidly approaching.
Yeah. Just the JEFC 1969 already sent in a question, but on YouTube he's come back at me and said Dobbin can't lead the line any more than Mopai. So difference of opinion, but we will see how Dobbin fares in the next couple of weeks and months if he gets to go. So, Chris, are you in attendance at Goodison Park on Saturday? I certainly am. I'll be in the lower Gladys.
Yeah, we'll be back there, Joe and myself. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. Just looking forward to get a game of football, like you said.
Absolutely. So yeah, Chris, thanks so much. For everyone listening, for everyone watching on Facebook, YouTube, please remember to follow and subscribe to our Facebook page and YouTube channel. We will be back with plenty of Everton content across the course of the next week or so, and hopefully we'll be reacting to a win at Luton and progression into the FA Cup 5th round. This has been the Royal Blue Podcast.